Hey everybody, Matthew here from Red Flare Coding, and today I'm going to be teaching you guys how to make a Sudoku game using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. This is going to be episode number 1 of a larger series, and today we're going to be going over the HTML code. But before I get into anything, I do want to show you guys what the final product is going to look like. Here we are. So this is the final project right here. As you guys can see, we have some game parameters: easy, medium, hard, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or light and dark themed, and we can change these however we like. And if we create a new game, you can see we have our board right here. We have a timer counting down based on our selection. There's 3 different boards based on easy, medium, and hard. I only use 3 boards just for simplicity, but obviously you could have more of those. These boards are not generating on their own. They are just being stored in 81 character strings, but you could of course have them come from some other source online, or you could try and generate them, but I would definitely not recommend that, and I'll talk about that in a later video, because it takes a lot of computing power to generate these. And then as you guys can see, we can select our numbers, select on the board, and we can select the board first and then the number. Incorrect, so it flashes red and lives remaining goes down. Or we can click the number first and then click the spot on the board. That one's correct, so nothing happened. But if we try it here, lives go down again, and if the time runs out, or if our lives go completely down, we lose the game. We can no longer do anything, and we have to start a new game. And you can also change the theme. The theme only updates when you create a new game, but we have a light theme and a dark theme here, just because the dark theme is so much better on your eyes. And pretty basic styling. One more thing to mention is that the board is actually made up of just normal HTML elements. This is definitely more HTML than maybe if you just used a canvas and just drew on the canvas, and then you're really just doing everything in JavaScript. But for this tutorial, I figured it'd be better to teach a little bit more about HTML and CSS as well, instead of it being purely JavaScript. And in the future, I might make a different tutorial about just drawing on a canvas. So if you're looking for drawing on canvas, this is not a good tutorial. But anyways, we're going to get started with the HTML, so why don't we hop into that. Alright guys, here I am in Visual Studio Code. I'm going to be using this editor because in my last videos, everyone complained how bad NetBeans is, and you guys were right. But you can use any editor that you like. You could use Notepad if you really wanted to, VS Code, NetBeans, blanking on the other ones, any of the other ones that you wanted to, really. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to teach you guys how to install VS Code because you should probably be able to do that if you're following a coding tutorial, and if not, there's a bunch of other tutorials out there. And again, you can use any editor that you like. Also, my reference code is up here, so if you're wondering why I'm constantly looking up there, that's why. But anyways, we're going to start by making a new file. I've just navigated to a Sudoku tutorial folder on my D drive in the games folder. So we're going to make a new file, and it's going to be called index.html, and this is the only file we're actually going to be working with today. We'll do the CSS in the next video, and then the JavaScript after that. And to start off, you just have to do some initial setup for any HTML files. So doc type HTML, just to tell the computer that this is an HTML file. We need an HTML tag right there, and then every HTML tag is going to have a head and a body farther down, not within the head. Whoops. A body right down there. And as you guys can see, VS Code does kind of set up the spacing for you and makes it relatively easy, which is why I like that. And then we are going to have some parameters inside the head tag, again, just to help set up the file. So for meta charset equals UTF-8, this is just the standard kind of a character set, so it knows how you're going to be notating everything, stuff like that. I'm not sure notating is the right word there, but this stuff doesn't really matter. It's just kind of to set up the file. If you don't understand any of this, it's not a big deal. This one is kind of cool though. This is the title. Sudoku is what I called it. You can call it Sudoku game if you'd like. Let's do Sudoku game. But now, hopefully this will open. We're going to save the file, and we're going to open default browser. We might have to finish everything else first. No, we don't have to. Yeah, so as you guys can see, the title right up here, Sudoku game, is the name of our tab. So you can change that to whatever you'd like. So if you'd prefer Sudoku, make sure to always save it. I'm just hitting Control S to save, but of course you can also file save right there. And if we go back to our Sudoku game, as you guys can see, if we refresh the page, we're going to see Sudoku up here. So you do need to make sure you're saving the file every time you add something, and you're refreshing the page in your browser. I'm going to minimize that. And for some more setup, we're going to link some other files. Link is equal to style sheet. href is equal to styles.css. So what this does is this is just telling the file that for any of your CSS styling, instead of doing it within the HTML file, we're going to have it on this other file, which I guess we should create. We're going to create a new file over here, styles.css. And if you're doing this without VS Code, if you're doing it in Notepad, what you would do is create a new text file, and then when you go to name it, you click the little drop down and you hit all files instead of just text files, and then you can name it styles.css. We're not actually going to use this file today, like I said, but I guess we should create it just so it's there so we don't have to come back to this HTML file later. And we're going to do one more thing similar to that. We're going to say script source is equal to index.js, and we're going to close the script tag right over there. Now we need to create another file. Same as before, this time it's index.js. Not going to add anything to these files today, like I said, but that's just telling it to access those files later once we have some actual code inside of them. And you could also do all of this within the HTML file if you really wanted to. The way I was taught is it's just better syntax and kind of better practice to separate them for simplicity and so other people can understand your code and things like that, which is why we're going to keep it separate. Also, I do have one extra parenthesis here. Sorry about that. Sometimes that happens with VS Code. Looks good otherwise. Okay, let's move on. So outside of the head tag, we are going to have a little bit more than just the body tag. We're also going to add a header right here. And I believe we're going to add a footer as well. Yep, we're going to add a footer as well right down there. And this is just to kind of separate our content between the top, the middle, and the bottom of the page. Kind of goes without being said. But within the header, we're going to add a few things. I need to scroll back up here. The first thing we're going to add is a title. So heading 1, and I just called it Sudoku. I constantly question myself in spelling Sudoku. So hopefully I don't spell it wrong because that would be embarrassing. Sudoku, did I spell? Yeah, I believe that's the correct way. This is really embarrassing, but it's a hard word to spell. So now if we save that as Control S, and we're gonna go here and refresh the page, now we have our Sudoku header right here. So there we go, we've officially added some content to our page. Now let's go back to our code right here, and we're gonna add a few more things within the header. What I actually had in the final solution was all of the options to set up the game. So changing the time or the difficulty or the theme, it was all within the header. And then I had that line, and then we went on to the body, which is where the actual game was. You could do it differently if you like, but this is how I chose to do it. So beneath that heading, we're going to create a div, which is just a divider. It doesn't actually place any new content on your web page, but it's just used for storing other elements and kind of arranging them. We're going to give it an ID so we can access it later. ID is going to be called setup game, just like that, and we're going to close that div. There we go. Now within the div, we're going to have a few more divs that are going to be the different parameters that we can set up. So the first one is going to be div ID is equal to diff. This is going to be for the difficulty. That's where we're going to change the difficulty of the game. And then the next one is going to be div ID is equal to time right there. This is how we're going to change how much time we want for the game. And the last one is going to be div ID is equal to theme. Just like that. And now we're going to add some elements within these divs so that way we can actually change the difficulty, time, and theme before we create our game. So what we're going to do first is we're actually going to start with a heading. I chose H3. I know you're not supposed to skip from H1 to H3, but I believe I use an H2 somewhere else in this file, although maybe not. This would be kind of embarrassing if I don't. Looks like I don't. I don't know. If you want to make it in H2, you can. I'm going to keep it in H3 just so I don't have to go back and change things in my CSS. But it's technically bad practice to jump from 1 to 3 without having a 2 in the middle. But, you know, no one's going to see that anyways. So H3, choose difficulty, just like that. I'm also going to add a semicolon just because I like semicolons and I think it makes it look nice. We're going to add a header inside the time div as well. And this one's also going to be an H3 for choose, not chose, time I did not add it. Oh, I do have a semicolon here. I also added a space. Yeah, we want a space as well, just to kind of give it some room there. These spaces, of course, aren't gonna like mess with any of your code because they're within the header element. And within the theme, we're gonna do one more header h3, and it's going to be choose theme, not chose theme, which I actually had in my solution code. Wow, once you go back and make a video, you notice all kinds of typos. Wow, yeah, chose theme. Well, choose theme is what we're going to use for our solution here. Now within these headers, we're going to add a few labels and inputs just so they can select the different options. So we're going to start with the label element, and then within the label, we're actually going to put the input. But first, let's just have easy label medium and label hard, just like that. And you guys may have noticed that VS Code automatically fills in the closing tags for you. You have like the open and the close right here, but if you're not doing this in VS Code, then you might have to type that automatically. Sometimes you don't need them. So for example, with like the link up here, it's just all within those two brackets right there. You don't have another close tag. I believe that's the proper name for it, closing tag. Outside of it, so definitely pay attention to that. But if you use VS Code, you don't even have to worry about it. So another reason to use VS Code, I guess. And then under choose time, we're gonna add a bunch more labels. We're going to say label 3 min. You could type out minutes if you really wanted to. For me, I chose to just do 3, 5, and 10 min, just so it's a little simpler. But that's up to you guys, of course. 3, 5, and 10, and then finally under choose theme, we're gonna have 2 labels here. The first one is going to be light, and the next one label is going to be dark. So now let's save this. Control S, as you can see, it's saved. We're gonna switch back to Chrome here, and we're going to refresh our page. And now you can see that we have these labels set up, but there's not actually any checkboxes next to them because we haven't created those input elements yet. We only have the labels right now. So let's go back to VS Code. I'm just alt-tabbing back and forth, by the way. Sorry if that's a little chaotic. It's quicker than trying to pull up my hotbar. And now that we're back in VS Code, we're going to add some inputs, and we're going to do them before the label. Right here. So after the label, or I'm sorry, before the text of the label, so before easy, after the label tag, we're going to do a new open bracket, and we're going to type input, and then there's going to be a bunch of parameters in here. So ID is going to be equal time1. Now you have to give it a unique ID to each one of these inputs, which is definitely kind of inefficient. This is the method that I chose because it seemed easiest when I originally made it, but I'm sure there's other ways to do this. So if you're reading this and kind of questioning that decision, that's why I did that. Alright guys, I had a little bit of a minor sneezing fit there. I think we're good now. I think we're good. Anyways, we finished our input here. The ID is going to be just so we can reference it later in our code, and I am assigning unique IDs to each one of the inputs. It was just the simplest method that I found, but I'm sure there are other methods out there. Type is radio, that's just going to tell it that this is a radio input. Name is diff, that's going to associate it with the other 2 inputs that are also going to have the diff name, and the value is easy, so we can access that later in our code. And we're going to have the word checked here. This just means that it's going to start out checked. We're not going to use that for the other inputs, but we will for this one. Now we're going to create the next one right before the medium text right there. Input ID is equal to, you guessed it, time2. Type is equal to radio. Name is equal to diff with a lowercase d, not a capital D. Value is equal to, you guessed it again, medium. And we're not going to put checked on this one because this one is not going to begin checked. And finally, let's do the last one. I'm actually just going to copy this. You got to work smarter, not harder. And we're going to paste it right here. And then we're just going to change this one to hard and change this to time 3 instead of time 2. Oh, geez, this is supposed to be diff, not time. Yep. I'm sure you guys were just yelling at your screens when you saw that. Just like that. There we are. Time is down here. That's supposed to be diff, not time. Okay. So these should all be linked up now. So if we save it and we switch back to our Chrome here and open our file, we're going to refresh the page. Oops. Refresh the page. And as you can see, I'm not sure why. Oh, it's because in the URL there's a space here, I think. So that's why it has that percentage 20. So as you can see, we have our choose difficulty, and we have our 3 options here: easy, medium, and hard. It automatically deselects the other ones when you select a new one, so you don't need to worry about that. That's having the radio type, having them all linked up. So there we go. Now we just need to add the inputs for the time and the theme as well. So we're going to do relatively the same thing. I'm going to go a little bit faster here. Input ID is equal to time 1. Type is equal to radio. Name is equal to time. Time is the name that I chose. Yep. And value is equal to. So here, there's a few different things you could do. I chose to actually write out in THRE3. I'm not sure that you have to do that, or that was even. I'm curious why I made that decision, but I did. I forgot a closing bracket here, which is why everything's messed up. But that's what I chose to do, so I'm going to keep it that way so the rest of my code doesn't need to be changed. But you could make that whatever you wanted as long as you change it within your JavaScript. But if you're just following this tutorial, make sure that's 3 and not a 3 like that, because those are very different when we reference them later. But otherwise, it's pretty much the same as above. The ID is just so we can reference it from our JavaScript. Type radio, name, time is to associate it with the other ones. Value is 3 and checked because we're going to start with 3 as the default. Now we're going to copy this, paste it into here. We're going to get rid of checked first off. We're going to change the value to 5, just like this. This is going to become time 2 because this is the second time input. And that all looks good to me. So now we're going to copy it again, paste it here, time 3 because it's the third input. And we're going to change this to 10, just like that. Okay, and now you guys have already seen this twice, so hopefully you have the hang of it, but we're going to do one more for the theme. Input ID is equal to theme1, type is equal to radio, name is equal to theme, not with a capital T. I'm not sure that the capital matters there. I think it would. And value is equal to light, just like that. And then we're going to add checked because light is the default. I'm going to copy this, paste it below, theme 2, change the value to dark, and we're going to remove checked. There we are. Okay, that was kind of a drag, but now we're done with all that, so we're going to Control S. As you can see, we have saved our file. Go back to Chrome, refresh, and the probably most annoying part of this video is now out of the way. So we have checkboxes here, and we can choose all of our parameters just like that. And we can hop into our game with the correct settings. So now let's go back to our HTML. I believe we're all done with the header. Oh, we're going to have one more thing within the header. Okay. So the last thing within the header, above all these divs, so outside of the setup game div, yeah, because it's below the parameters. Okay, that makes sense. Is we're going to have a button right here. So we're going to create the button just like that. And then we're going to, first of all, add the text, create new game, just like that. So I'm going to save. Anything within here is going to be the text on the button. So let's go back to Chrome right here and refresh. We can see our create new game button, just like that. Of course, it doesn't do anything yet. That'll happen in a future video. But let's go back to our code, and we're going to do one more thing for this button. We're going to give it an ID. Make sure this is inside the first tag, not right here, because then it'll just become text on the button. So right here, we're going to say ID is equal to start button, just like that. BTN is short for button. And I think that's it for the header tag. Yes, okay. Hardest part is out of the way. We're getting there. Don't worry, guys. On to the body. Let's make a new line here. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up some more divs. I have some divs at the top of the body. One of them, well, I have one at the top. It's going to be called ID stats, just like that. And we're going to close it just like that. And what this is going to do is this is going to store that timer and the lives remaining. So we're going to put 2 paragraph elements in here, just like that. The first one, actually we're going to keep them blank for now because these are going to be populated by our JavaScript. But we are going to give them IDs so we can access them with the JavaScript. So the first one is going to have the ID of timer, just like that. and the second one is going to have the ID of lives. Just like that. So I'll give you guys a second to take a look at that right there. Again, this is a div element. The div doesn't actually do anything, it just contains other stuff. And what this is going to do is these are the two stat elements, so we can like hide or make these visible whenever we want to. And these two paragraph elements are going to display the timer and the lives remaining, and those will be populated by our JavaScript, which is why we're not putting any text in here. Just for now, we could say timer and lives and save it. Go to our Chrome. You guys can see our timer and lives right there. But again, we're going to keep these blank for right now so we can populate those later. And that's it for the stats div. Now we're going to have another div that is going to be the game div. So we're going to create a new div right here. We're going to give it an ID of game, just like that. And within this, we're going to have, you guessed it, even more divs. You know, it's not unusual to have tons of divs just for storing stuff, and, you know, it really helps with the formatting. Again, if you used a canvas and you were drawing on the canvas, clearly you wouldn't be doing all of this. But I figured maybe this will help learn HTML a little bit more rather than having the game be just solely JavaScript, which is why I'm using all these divs and paragraph elements and stuff like that. It may not be the most efficient method. It might be easier for some people, but this is just what I chose for this video. So within the div, the game div right here, we're actually going to have, like I said, another div. Div ID is equal to board. There we are. So we're going to have our board right here, and this is where we're going to contain all of the other paragraph elements, or I guess the other divs that store the paragraph elements, perhaps. Let me take a look at my code real quick here. No, okay, actually, I'm sorry. So the board div, we're going to back this up and we're going to keep it on the same line because we're not going to put anything in here. This is the one that's going to contain all of our individual tiles on the board. We're not going to populate those right now. Those are going to be filled in with our JavaScript, so we're just going to leave that there. But underneath the board div, there are other elements to the game besides just the board. So I just did a bunch of rambling. I'm not sure where I'm going to cut that. Sorry for the hard cut. Anyways, we created a new div, number container. This is going to store all of our numbers from the bank on the side, and we're going to add the hidden class. This isn't going to do anything yet, but once we go in our CSS and actually change it to make that anything with the hidden class is hidden, then it will be hidden. But right now, adding this class isn't actually going to do anything. You can't just say class equals hidden and expect it to be hidden. But we'll change that in our CSS in a later video. Sorry if that's kind of confusing. That sounded confusing just saying it. But anyways, within our number container class, we're actually going to populate each of these, ID 1, and then close, and we're going to put 1 right there. So we're going to make 1 through 9 right here. I'm actually going to copy paste. It might be marginally faster. Not sure that it will. Yeah, we're not going to copy paste. It'll be fun. But what this is going to do is this is going to create each of those tiles on the right side of our board that we can select to then assign that number to somewhere inside the interior of the board. And the reason that these ones are just being populated by JavaScript, but the number container is actually going to be in our HTML, is that there's only 9 of them. So it's not too inefficient to type it out like this, and they're not going to be dynamic. They're not going to be changing. They're always going to be 1 through 9. So that's why I'm just creating them in the HTML right here. 6, 6, just like that. And the reason we're giving them IDs is because we do need to access them from the JavaScript when we give them event listeners. So if we click on them, then it'll have to do an action. Normally you wouldn't really give IDs to paragraph elements too often. I guess we did above as well for those, the timer and the lives remaining. But you wouldn't normally give too many IDs, but that's why we're doing it here. 9, I've been talking while doing this, so it makes it a little harder. Let's make sure there's no typos or anything. Looks pretty good to me. Okay, so now we're going to close the number container div right there. And if we go back to, let's save, and then if we go back to Chrome here, we can see 1 through 9 right here are showing. That looks good. They obviously don't have any styling yet because we haven't created that. Eventually we'll give them a little border, make the text bigger so you can actually read it, and they'll be populated on the right side of the screen here. And like I said, even though it has the hidden class, they're still not hidden. And this is because this hidden class doesn't actually do anything yet. We have to add that to our CSS, and we'll do that in the next video. I want to make sure that that's clear to you guys, because just reading this and not knowing much about HTML, I might think that this actually makes it hidden. But it does not make it hidden until you actually add something to that class in the CSS. Okay, so moving on, that's it for our number container div, and that's also going to be it for our game div. So we're actually just about done. The final thing that we're going to do is put something in the footer, just for good measure. For me, on my other code, I made this like within a bigger project, so I had to return to the home page there. We're not going to do that in this case, so I'm just going to add a p element, and I'm going to say made by Matthew from Red Flyer Coding. Typing while you're recording is so stressful. I swear I don't make that many errors normally. I always make so many errors when I'm recording. But anyways, we're going to save this and go back to Chrome here and refresh. And as you can see, our footer was added right there. This looks really ugly right now because it's not styled. Don't worry, in the next video we will be styling it. Everything will be moved to the center, be made larger so you can actually read it. We'll add some color to the page, things like that. And I think it'll be good. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm going to go back to VS Code real quick here. And I can't really, well, I could try and zoom out enough so you guys can see all of it. This is probably obnoxiously small for you, especially if you're watching on a phone. Maybe if you're on a computer, you can zoom in. Hopefully you guys were able to follow along. I tried to make the text fairly large so you could see it clearly. Yeah, we can almost store all of it. This has all of it except for the footer. The footer is pretty basic. Hopefully you guys can figure out the footer, but here's everything else. Maybe you guys can pause the video and zoom in if you have any errors. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see that. I realize how small it is. But hopefully you guys can pause the video throughout, and the text was pretty big, so you should be able to see everything there. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments down below, and I'll do my best to answer them, or hopefully someone else will answer them if I can't. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, drop a like, subscribe to see the next video. I'll leave a link to the playlist down below as well. I plan to upload the next video within a week or so. Shouldn't be too long. It won't be like a year. I promise you that. But anyways, hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one.